Okay, good morning. We are on Lamed Ches Amud Aleph 38a. We are 4 lines from the bottom of the page. Tanya Idach. As with the last 2-3 classes or so, the Gemara is citing to numerous Mishnaic era texts that elaborate on the Mishnah. The Mishnah told us some of the basic laws of the Brichat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, standing in Hebrew, hands stretched out. In the temple, God's name as is written. Outside the temple, God's substitute name, Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And the Gemara then quoted a number of different Mishnaic era texts, brises, that go through these different laws, and now some new ones that have been introduced, and give us the derivation from scripture that leads to these laws. So first they went through the laws of the Mishnah, standing, hands out, Hebrew, God's name pronunciation. And then yesterday we added 2 new laws that haven't been mentioned yet in the Mishnah and their derivation from the verse. The first is that all Jews are part of the blessing, not only men, Jewish-born males, as the verse states, such shall you bless the sons of Israel, which on its literal level you might think means male-born Jews or sons of Israel, and therefore that would exclude converts or women. The Gemara concluded, no, it includes all Jews, as the verse writes, Amar lahem, say to them in the plural, meaning many. So as I mentioned yesterday, this Amar lahem, okay, likewise, the Amar lahem, tell them, teaches us that the people receiving the blessing are to be facing the Kohanim, even though their faces are covered, as the Shulchan Aruch writes. And that's for different reasons, that they shouldn't be embarrassed, shouldn't be seeing each other, but they're still facing each other. And that too is derived from this word, and Amar lahem, speak to them, just like a man speaks to his friend. That's what the Torah instructs the blessing should be done. And when a person speaks to a friend, you speak face to face. You don't turn your back to a friend who's talking to you. At least you ought not to. Oh, sorry? Yeah. Now this phrase, Amar lahem, is going to be used again to derive some other laws. And it's important, as I mentioned yesterday, because this is the full verse. God speaks to Moshe saying, Dabar al Aaron v'al banav, speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, such shall you bless the Jewish people. And Amar lahem, tell them, Yivarach Hashem ish baracha, and then the blessing goes on. So that refrain, Amar lahem, tell them, didn't have to be there for the flow. It could have said, speak to the Jewish people saying, speak to Aaron and his children saying, such shall you bless the people, and then go straight to the blessing. Why add Amar lahem, speak to them, after it says, such shall you bless, and then the actual blessing? So that refrain, Amar lahem, tell them, teaches us a number of laws. As we already saw, first of all, the fact that it's speak to them in the plural means that the blessing belongs to all Jews, not just sons of Israel. Likewise, it tells us that that it has to be in conversation form, face to face. Now it's going to teach us one more law.
Why do they have colors?
So you have to look at the Shulchan Aruch. It's in the Shulchan Aruch, and essentially, remember correctly, Alter discusses this in his Shulchan Aruch. I'll pull it up right now, and essentially, yeah, I don't know. It's a very technical thing about not seeing the Kohanim, so for not to distract them and not to embarrass them. I can look it up right now. Please see blessing. Here, it's going to be in here. We'll do a little word search to make it quick. Here we go. Where is it? Let's go to the next one.
Understand if it was God.
Sorry?
I can understand if it was God. I look at it.
No. There's a it's not like it's not as like spiritual as it was, if I remember correctly.
You were saying to me
Yeah,
yesterday.
that was my suggestion.
Yeah.
Here.
Be so bold faced.
Yeah.
Accepting.
Okay, so this is about someone who's a kohen who's blemished. Down 1 second. Oops. Sorry. So pull up that word. It has never become customary to play air. When the kohanim are blessing the people, they should not look at them, so as their attention will not be diverted. So it's a question of, from the halachic perspective, it's a question of distraction. Instead, their eyes should be turned toward downward, as with a person in the midst of a concentrated prayer. For indeed, they are praying to the Holy One, blessed be He, that He bless the entire Jewish people. The people who receive the blessing should also concentrate on the blessing and should face the kohanim for the reason given above. Right, the pasuk says face to face. They should not look at them, so as their attention will not be diverted. Certainly, they should not look elsewhere. It's quite about concentration. It's like covering your eyes by Shema. It has therefore become customary in many places for each of the kohanim to draw his talis over his face and hands, so that they will not be able to look at the people, nor the people look at them, neither at their faces nor at their hands. Right? In these countries, the kohanim follow the custom of drawing the talisim over their face, custom of drawing their talisim over their faces only, so that they will not be able to look at the people, their hands by contrast remain outside the talisim. But our custom is actually to have our talis, the hands covered also. Yeah.
If the coin doesn't have his talents over his head, he could be looking at one person.
And the distraction, that's all. Yeah.
Blessing that person.
Yep. Yeah, and also another thing is that there's a kohen who has a blemish, let's say his face is deformed in some way, might be disqualified from giving the Brichat Kohanim because of the distraction he'll give to the community. But because here, if the local custom is that the Kohanim draw their talisim over the face, and a Kohen can recite the priest's blessing even if his face has a number of blemishes, for there's no need for concern that the listener's concentration will be distracted because it's covered. If, however, this is not the custom, but the Kohen with the blemish desires to draw a talis over his face, it's forbidden, since he will be acting differently than his colleagues. People will stare at him and their attention will be diverted. Even if all Kohanim are willing to draw their talisim over the face, license should not be granted because it's not the custom. So our custom of covering the face is, first of all, for to promote concentration. And also, if there's a kohen who's blemished, having his face covered allows him to do the blessing, which otherwise he wouldn't be able to because his face causes a distraction. It's a technical thing. But as you said yesterday, that perhaps on the spiritual level, the reason is, notwithstanding the fact the blessing has to be done face to face, as we discussed yesterday, because a person has to face the blessings to be able to receive them, to notice them and to acknowledge them. But perhaps the covering of the face indicates a certain humility. You're facing your blessing, but not bold-faced, not arrogant. But again, the basic halachic reason is for distraction. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, maybe for you. All right. So back to where we are. Right. So this refrain, Emar Lahem, speak to them, in the introduction to the mitzvah. Such shall you bless the people. Tell them is a phrase used here and elsewhere. So actually, the discussion is more elaborate elsewhere. Rashi cites to it, as we'll see in a moment, exactly who is speaking to whom. The fact that the kohen have to speak to the people is already stated. Such shall you bless. Then Amar Lahem, tell them who is now telling them. So now, in this Gemara, this context, what we're taking from this word Amar Lahem is that the manner in which the kohen speaks to the people have to be in such a way that one friend speaks to another. Amar Lahem, tell them, as if you're telling someone anything. Following? And elsewhere, the Gemara will just
Same word, speak
it's the same word, speak to them. But the words speak to them tell you the manner in which the kohen should speak to the people in such a manner that you would be telling your friend something. So yesterday we learned that it means face to face. Now we're going to learn other laws derived from that same refrain, Amar Lahem. In this context, that Amar Lahem is a refrain teaching us how the Kohen is supposed to communicate to people. Do so in such a way that one friend speaks to another.
Like the third derivation of this. Speak to them, right?
There's going to be many of them. There's going to be a few, but they all come down to the same thing, which is speak the way you would to a friend. So the first one is be face to face. Number two, you're speaking to all of them. That was the second one, right? So you're right, the second one. And now we're coming to the third one. From the same refrain about that. We're clear? What?
We're not doing the same thing.
What do you mean?
I wouldn't speak to you. You're at the top. You're at the top.
Yeah, okay, that's
where you are.
but actually we're going to see in a moment that Emor Lahem also indicates that that's how it should be. But we're going to see. We're going to see. But it's breaking down the elements of conversation into smaller bits. The first thing is everybody, because it says Emor Lahem in the plural, speak to them in the plural. Number two, speak to them like a conversation, face to face. We're going to go through various different details of human conversation and see. We'll get there. All right, Tanya Idach. So we learned in another Mishnayik text. The verse reads, like this you shall bless. God says to Moshe, tell Aaron and his children, like this you shall bless the Jewish people. And that should be done, the Kol Ram, out loud. Well, perhaps it might suggest it should be done in an undertone, like a prayer is done in an undertone. Why does it have to be out loud? Right? In theory, if the Kohanim are just bringing down God's blessing, and as we've been discussing until now, it's almost irrelevant what the state of the people receiving the blessings are. The blessings are flowing anyway. So why does it have to be out loud? Just say it in undertone. You're drawing down God's blessings, and that's it.
It's not like you're speaking to anyone if it's in an undertone.
Who said you have to speak to anybody?
The verse says,
So Talmud Sotah comes the verse and says, Amar Lahem, speak to them. Like a person speaking to his friend. So this is another element of this idea that the Amar Lahem, the verse says, speak to them as if there's a conversation. First of all, face to face. Number two, loud enough that they can hear you. And I think this ties into what we were talking about yesterday, whereas the blessing comes flowing from heaven irrespective, but the recipient has to be available and open and humble enough to acknowledge the blessing is there. So if that's the case, then the blessing has to be spoken in such a manner that I can pick it up. And thus it's got to be out loud. Like one friend is speaking to another.
Three people. Make their voice sound clear. 3 million people.
Talking about back then, when Aaron and his children did it, I don't know. They did have, even in ancient Greece, amphitheaters in which hundreds of thousands of people were able to hear. They designed these things that way. But I don't know. Can't tell you. Okay. So this all so far has been, sorry? I don't know. That's a technique. That's a question in the... No, he's talking about in the desert. Aaron and his 2 children, they're doing the original blessing to the people. It's roughly somewhere between 2 and 3 million people. And it's only 3 people communicating to them. You're right, good question.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's discussed. Just don't know offhand, because I mean that's a question for Brichat for like the text, not really related to what the Gemara is doing here, which is the laws of Brichat Kohanim somehow. I'm sure it's discussed. I just have to look up the Chumash there. Okay.
Well, there were more revealed miracles at that time.
Yeah. So perhaps there's a miraculous element to this. Certainly. Just I'm sure the commentary discussed it. Can look it up. You got some homework. Okay, so till now we've been quoting Mishnayik era texts to derive these laws. And the Mishnayik texts were like in this conversation form. It opens up by saying you got to do it out loud. Well, maybe it's got to be quietly. Oh, no, it says, Amar Lahem, speak to them. And speak to them implies one friend speaking to another, and therefore it's got to be out loud, it's got to be face to face. Okay. Now, the Gemara now inserts here, before it gets to the next set of discussion, it inserts now a conversation from the Gemara's era. Right, till now we've been quoting Mishnayik era texts. Now we're going to the Gemara's era. So we're fast forwarding a couple hundred years. We're looking at scholars of the Gemara's age that are analyzing the text we just quoted. So the text we just quoted tell us that the refrain Amar Lahem, speak to them, teaches us that it's got to be in conversation form. And the fact that it's plural means that it's to all people. Now, there's another element to Amar Lahem, which is like this. Just literally speaking, I'm reading the entire verse in English and just tell me what you think the words mean. Such shall you bless the children of Israel. Tell them. Who's telling who? Again, God speaks to Moses saying, speak to the children, to Aaron and his sons. This is how they should bless the Jewish people. Tell them. Who's telling who?
Tell them what to say.
So which means Moshe is being instructed to tell the people, to tell Aaron what to say. That's literally what the verse means. Right? Didn't he just tell them what to say? He said, tell the sons of Aaron's, such shall you bless the people. So I already said, tell them. Right? How many kids did that? He already said, tell them, just sit down for a few minutes or listen to the class, the morning voice. Well, yeah. So the verse already says, such shall you bless the people. So there already is an instruction from Moshe Rabbeinu to tell the people, to tell Aaron.
Such means refer back to what I mentioned.
Yeah, let me read the whole thing again. God speaks to Moses saying, speak to the sons of Aaron, saying, such shall you bless the people. So Moshe was already instructed to tell Aaron to bless in such a fashion. And then it repeats itself and says, speak to them.
Maybe he needs to tell them in such a fashion.
And then and then it repeats and tell them. Which means that it's actually telling them, it actually means then that tell them is how the blessing should be done. When the blessing is done, you tell them what to say. Hence, the Chazan tells the Kohen what to say. Yivarechacha. And the Kohen says Yivarechacha. This is where it comes from. You see? Because first, God says, tell Aaron, here's how you bless the people. And then after he says, tell them, as a part of the manner of blessing is that you tell them to bless as their blessing. Thus, we derive from here that the Chazan tells the Kohanim what to say. Right? But now, right, that's what the basic meaning is. And tell them what to say. And Marlem, tell them. Right? Now, tell them is in the plural. Before we said the plural is talking about the plurality of Jewish people. But in this context, where we're talking about the leader telling the Kohanim what to say, the them is who? The Kohanim. So in biblical era, it's the three of them, Aaron and his two sons. But now when we apply the Jewish law, how many Kohanim need to be up there for the Chazan to announce to the Kohanim what to say? Yeah. Well, to satisfy the verse, it's got to be at least two. Otherwise, it's not tell them. If we're deriving from this word, tell them, that part of the manner in which the blessing is to happen is that the Chazan has to tell them what to say. That only applies if there's them. If there's a plural of Kohanim to speak to. Following?
Yeah.
That's what the Gemara is about to say. Amar Abaye says, Nakdinon, we are of the opinion that l'shnayim koyda koyanim. When there's two or more, then the leader calls out to the Kohanim and says, Koyanim, calling them, because it says tell them. So you got to tell them, hey Kohanim, do your blessing. And then likewise, as it goes on to say, Yivarecha, and so on. Actually, the main point here is to call them, to tell them to go bless. The Chazan is to tell them to bless, which is why he calls out Kohanim. But v'la'echad, if there's only one Kohen, ain't a Kohen. He doesn't call out saying, hey Kohen, go bless. Shenemar, because the verse reads, Emar lahem, tell them the Kohanim to bless. L'shtayim, which is a minimum of two. Otherwise, there's no plural. This is Abaye. Amar Rav Chisda, but Rav Chisda rejoins and says no. Nakdinon, we are of the view that Kohen, Rav Chisda adds another point. Nakdinon, we learn, that Kohen, only if the Chazan, the leader, isn't himself a Kohen, does he call the Kohen, does he announce Kohanim, calling them up to bless? Only if he is. The Ein Yisrael Kohanim, but an ordinary Jew would not call out to the Kohanim to make the blessing. Why? Again, because remember the verse reads, Emar lahem, tell them. Who's telling them? In the case of biblical times, it's Moshe Rabbeinu telling them. That's what God says. Moshe speaks to them. But as we translate into generations to come, says Rav Chisda, Amira, the calling out, top of 38b, Mishalahem should be from them to hey, it should be. And Mar Lahem, tell them, the phrasing almost sounds like it's hard to translate into English. And Mar Lahem. And Mar Lahem, tell them, it could also be saying them. Sound making as if someone I've been translating as tell them, which is really the direct translation. But the way in which it comes out is something like saying them, as if them themselves are doing the saying too. So this refrain, calling out to the Kohen that they should bless, should also be from them. Meaning, only if a Kohen is doing the calling out, not an ordinary Israelite. This is view. So you have two more laws derived from.
As well.
Well, there are two different statements. Gemara is going to tell us who to follow. Two independent statements derived from the same words, right? So we have one. Earlier, we talked about Amar Lahem, tell them as a description of how the Kohen should be communicating to the people. The Kohen should communicate like a friend speaks to a friend, out loud and face to face. But really, the direct translation of Amar Lahem is an instruction to someone, in the case of biblical times, Moshe Rabbeinu, to tell them, tell the Kohen what to do. So A, you derive from here, said Abaye, that it's only if you have more than one Kohen, because it's tell them in the plural. B, said Rav Chizda, this statement, tell them, which really directly translates as saying them, means that only if they themselves are the person calling out, if the Kohen himself is the person calling out, then you would have the leader call out the Kohanim to bless, otherwise, no such calling out.
Aaron did it. He was the one calling out.
No, Moshe was. Because God says to Moshe, Amar Lahem, tell them. So Moshe would have been the one calling out. Yeah, he would have been the chazan. Says the Gemara, sorry?
Where you have it today.
Right, but we don't, but even if,
Moshe Rabbeinu was the cause.
okay, so following this, which law do we keep today? Both of them?
No.
Because sometimes the chazan is not a kohen, he's still calling out. Right?
A lot of times the cause is not.
That's right. So the Gemara concludes, the law is, Kavaseda Abaye. We do follow Abaye, in that there's got to be a minimum of two kohenim up there in order for this announcement to be called kohenim. Now, the truth is today, the way we do the chazan calling out kohenim, he doesn't just yell kohenim. He says that word kohenim as part of a verse. And he says the rest of the verse quietly. Am Kadeshach Kamar. You don't hear it. Is there a siddur there? Yeah, is there a siddur there?
Yeah.
So you can see. Yeah, thank you. So I'll show you what he does. Not so far down, 352.
Oh, I thought there was an illustration on the back.
Yes, there is an illustration. So it's like this. After the congregation has recited, we thankfully, the Moedim, with the Chazan, the Kohanim recite the following. They say the Yiratzim, right? Okay. The Kohanim prolong the recital to conclude it as the Chazan concludes the blessing of Toiv Shimcha, so that the congregation answers Amen to both. You know that, right? Okay. The Chazan says quietly, he says, then he announces Kohanim, then he says quietly again, so when he announces Kohanim, he doesn't do it as an independent calling out to the Kohanim. He does it as part of a whole prayer, which he says, our God, God of our fathers, bless us with the threefold blessing written in the Torah by Moses, your servant, and pronounced by Aaron and his sons. Kohanim, you're consecrated people, as it said. Right? Yeah. So that part is already taken care of in that sense. But the law is, says the Gemara, that we follow Abaye, that only if there's many Kohanim do we have the Chazan call out Kohanim. So I'm going to pull it up here. Here. Okay, we have to, it's
Is this universally followed or for some community?
no, it's universally. There's even a whole discussion about whether the whole community is Kohanim, yeah.
Even when I was a kid, because our family was all Kohen.
Yeah.
My father had 3 other brothers. So my father used to say, come. And I hear Kohanim.
Yeah, one second, let's see. Kohanim.
I was too shy to.
There's too many. Okay, it's going to take time to find this. Never mind. You can search like this. Okay. Let's leave this for now. Okay. So the law is that you have to have multiple kohanim in order to call out kohanim, but the lays hilchas the kapaseder of Chizda. But the law does not follow Rav Chizda. Meaning, Rav Chizda, he said that only if the chazan himself is a kohen does he call out. That we do not follow. As we know, every chazan does it. As I said, it's done part of the blessing of Lakenu V'Lekav V'Seidum Brachenu V'Bracha. Okay, so God willing, today's Thursday. So tomorrow we'll get to some more post-Mishnaic era teachings from the Gemara's era. Some very beautiful teachings about God's relationship with the blessing and the way in which it comes to the people, as well as different laws, further to the laws about the laws of Kohanim, the laws of Brichat Kohanim. Wonderful day, Eden.
Recording.